I was just more and more curious all of the time about how it all works. We're these little specks of dust at this intersection of space and time. We're on a little rock flying through a galaxy. We're spinning around at 800 miles an hour on our axis. Like, how does this all make sense? So for me, it was nourishing curiosity. I really, I don't push that on people, but I really suggest to people that it's, especially in today's world that is so divisive and so sort of solidly entrenched in multiple ecosystems, right? I think it makes life easier. I think it makes you a better human being by being continually being curious and not saying, "Oh, I've arrived." I mean, that was my lesson, right? I thought I had arrived. Open another book or look at another way of seeing things, or you see the sort of multidimensional kaleidoscope that life is.
This is Unconditioning, Discovering the Voice Within, with Whitney Ann Jenkins.
Hello and welcome to the 75th episode of Unconditioning Discovering the Voice Within, where I bring on guests and we talk about the inner authentic voice and the challenges and the rewards that come from following it. This week, I have with me Colin Kingsmill. Colin is a private coach for entrepreneurs, CEOs, and founders looking to make a meaningful shift in the way they approach their lives and how they are impacting the world. In 2001, with an MBA and a successful decade in Swiss banking behind him, he decided to make a radical reset, give up most of his possessions and perceived status, and step into the unknown. He had everything he wanted, but it was not fulfilling to him. He spent the past 20 years working in branding, sales, marketing, and communications across the globe in destination building, and at the same time, diving into everything that drives people. With all this life and work experience behind him, he now coaches, advises, and mentors extraordinary individuals making important changes in their personal and professional lives. He provides a space for business owners to talk strategically through their pivot plans and fears as they grapple with the challenges of today's world. And I had a really lovely conversation with Colin. We talked about his journey through exploration of continuously staying curious and finding the things that make life a little more interesting and enriching, especially when it could be perceived that you have it all. So here is my conversation with Colin. Enjoy.
That sounds great. I love organic conversations. I think they've always turned out better for me than the pre-organized list of questions and stuff like that. So that's great. Yeah, that's improv.
Yeah.
I love it.
Especially because you, in your line of work,
Hmm.
are guiding people
Hmm.
to listen to their inner voice.
Yeah.
So in order for you to be able to do that, you had to cultivate that for yourself.
Hmm.
So when was the first time that you can remember realizing that you had this inner authentic voice of your own and you were able to recognize?
Gosh, that's a good question, because I think in the first chapter of my life, which was up until I was about 35, I wasn't listening to anybody or anything. So it certainly wasn't when I was younger and much more ambitious. And I I think I've actually started to hear my voice very recently, even in the last few years since I kind of discovered my mission. There was it's almost like for me, it was almost like a three-step process. Like in the beginning, I I wasn't listening to anything. And then I had, you know, the second chapter was almost of kind of acquisition of knowledge and learning and expanding my horizons. And it wasn't so much that I was listening to my inner voice, but I was listening to other voices. I was just starting to go, oh, wait, hold on. There's something more about this. There's something more about life. There's something deeper. Um, there's deeper meaning. I didn't know what it was, but I just started to listen to other voices that were not sort of your MBA ambitious track that you're, supposed to be on, and you read the business books and 7 Habits of Highly Successful People, and you do all the checklist, right? So it was a period of not listening, beginning to listen to others, and then in the last few years, um, really discovering that I did have my own inner voice and my own power and my own purpose and my own mission. Um, but yeah, it's been relatively new, so it took a long time, 50 plus years to get to that. And it was the moment I started listening was when I recognized when I recognized sort of issues and trauma and stories and old narratives that I was telling myself in my head, and realized recognize them for what they were, just stories, and that I
Mhm.
could actually stop listening to those old stories and really kind of go inward and say, well, what are the new ones? And that's been a realization of late, that I didn't have to listen to the old narratives and the old stuff going on. That, oh, if I stopped, turned those off for a little while, I could think of new ones and start listening to those instead, and that I was in control of that messaging and that voice and what it said. So
Yeah.
yeah, but it was a process.
Yeah. So speaking of old narratives, I kind of like
Yeah.
go back to the beginning of Colin,
Mm,
and the way that you were brought up, just to kind of get an idea of how your belief systems maybe have transformed over life. So,
yep.
mm, in your family upbringing, were you encouraged to like think of a deeper meaning in life? With attached to your upbringing?
Yeah. So I was encouraged. I was really encouraged to think about unlimited possibilities. So my father was and is an artist, so you can imagine he was just like really kind of expansive and do whatever you like and be whoever you want to be. And um, my mother was Swiss, so that was kind of the opposite of that. It's like, well, this is the rail that you want to follow, and this is the path you want to follow, and these are the markers of success and everything like that. So I really kind of had this interesting upbringing of kind of both sides of the coin, right? But what got in the way, I think, was not so much my parents, but the environment around me, and the kids around me at school. And I was always very different. I didn't fit in. I didn't fit into the mold. I we lived beside the school, but my parents had a hobby farm, so I was like the weirdo with the animals and like Dr. Doolittle. And so I was really out of place. And what that taught me to that I was unworthy, and that I wasn't enough, and that I was different, and um, that I didn't fit in.
Mhm.
And so it's interesting what school and young people can do to each other, right? In terms of bullying and really setting the tone for your whole life. So up until I was 35, I spent that whole time compensating for that kind of core wound of unworthiness, right? And it certainly didn't come from my parents, not at all. It came from society and schooling and education, and um, that I was in,
Yeah.
and made me made me pursue success.
Yeah. And what
In
part of the world was that school and environment for you? So we can kind of picture it.
It's interesting, it was in places that you wouldn't suspect to be harmful,
Mhm.
right? So I grew up in British Columbia, in the Okanagan, which for all intents and purposes is and was a beautiful place. It was full of orchards and vineyards and wineries, and it was kind of like the Napa Valley
Mm.
of Canada, if you like. So contextually, I was surrounded by nature and water and everything. And then we moved to an island off the coast of British Columbia, much like the San Juan Islands in the States. So again, very contextually, the context was beautiful
Right.
and surrounded by nature, people sort of Waldorf school type upbringing. Um, in the forest and close to nature. But it's interesting. Uh, you look back, or a parent would look back today and say, "Oh wow, that was an amazing upbringing," and it was. It ticked a lot of boxes in terms of nature and things like that. But I was all by myself, right? I uh, I developed this thing like, oh, you live on all this acreage in the forest and you have a sauna by the river. I mean, all really amazing stuff. But I was the weirdo, right? I was like, I'm the one that had to drive 5 kilometers to school, and I'm the one that had all the pigs and chickens and stuff beside. And I just wanted that. I wanted that over there. I wanted that suburban house that my friends had across the street, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so, so it's really weird because your question is kind of provocative in my mind, anyway, about like notwithstanding kind of an organic, nature-filled upbringing, I put in my head, or I got into my head, that I wasn't enough and I wasn't worthy, and I needed to be more, and I needed to demonstrate something to fit in.
Yeah.
So
Sounds like a very like idyllic kind of scenario of upbringing.
yeah,
But we all have like this thing inside of us. I like to call it the daimon, from Greek literature, like this inner drive or urging that propels us forward.
right,
So
right.
like you get this like really lovely place, as far as like your growth for yourself. Like we all have to start.
Hmm. Yeah, interesting. I hadn't thought about it that way. It's it's interesting how I guess for me, thinking back now at your question, it's like we were kids, where we weren't taught to think about like our mind or mindfulness or expansion, or discover who you are, or that your uniqueness is a superpower. And maybe things have changed a little bit today, but I don't know, maybe with social media it's even worse. But being totally different, or perceiving that I was totally different and that I wasn't enough, and that my dad was an artist, and I just pursued the complete opposite, right? So, go to school, get an education, move to Switzerland, go into banking, wear a suit and tie, right? All these things that I thought were it, right? Oh well, if I'm wearing a suit and tie and I'm working at a Swiss bank, then I'm okay.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. So so what was it that got you out of that environment? Like, did you choose a college that was outside of like your home base?
no, look, I continued. I did my undergraduate in Vancouver, and then I did an MBA in Milan. I um, I I strove to have all the trappings of success, right? Um, and we don't have to go through the list now because it's kind of embarrassing. But um, you know, it, it but in the process of sort of 10 years of working in financial services, and partially for myself and with some partners and things like that, it just depleted me. It depleted my soul, until one day, friends were saying, look, you're so stressed out, you're gonna die of a heart attack at 30. And I was speeding around Italy doing business development, and I'm surprised I wasn't in multiple car crashes. But it was one car crash, actually, that did wake me up.
Mhm.
I was driving up into the mountains to go skiing at a fabulous ski resort, and I spun out and I landed in the ditch instead of the lake. And that just stopped me in my tracks. I'm like, hold on, where are you going? Like, not figuratively up to the ski resort, but it's like, where are you really going with all of this? And that's when friends kind of said, well, have you tried Reiki? Have you tried meditation? Have you, by the way, there's this thing called spirituality. And I'm like, what? What are you talking about? And that's when chapter 1 ended. And
Yeah. So that's really interesting because you're traveling around all of these like really beautiful places, yet you're extremely stressed out. Like
ugh,
seems to be a reflection of the way that you were brought up too in a really like beautiful place in nature and not being able to fully appreciate your surroundings because you feel so isolated and um
yeah, interesting. I hadn't thought about it like that before, but you're right. My surroundings once again were beautiful. I mean, the Swiss Alps and Italy and the lakes and all that stuff, just beautiful, beautiful parts of the world, and even Canada when I was back here. Um, but I wasn't. I well, I guess I mean I forgive myself as a child. I didn't know what looking inward meant, but as a young adult, again, nobody teaches you, mm, at least then, to be thinking about your soul and your heart and asking you where are you running to, and what does all of this mean, or what. And I actually do that a lot today when I'm working with people. It's asking the why, right? Why? When you're talking with somebody about their career or about striving and about success and things like that, it's like, well, what's the why? Why are you doing this? Why are you really doing this? What is it feeding,
right.
right? And for me, it was just feeding that sense of unworthiness that I had adopted as a kid.
Yeah.
Um, for 10 or 15 years, 10 or 12 years, just feeding that monster of unworthiness is
Yeah.
God, it's such a waste of energy, isn't it? Well, oh,
Yeah. So you had a car crash and
yeah.
what jolted you out of that to maybe think deeper about where you were heading.
Hmm.
So do you remember the first steps that got you away from where you didn't want to be heading?
Well, it all happened on one weekend, and it was like April 6th, 2001, where I I I just realized that I realized it was all wrong, and I was wearing a mask and a cloak that didn't feel like me anymore, or it didn't feel like who I thought I needed to become. So I literally, over a weekend, I said, that's it to financial services. That's it to Europe. That I'm going to give everything away, and start fresh. I just needed to shed that. I needed to shed all the stuff, because the stuff had weighed me down. The stuff had become meaningless, and I recognized with the car crash, figuratively and literally, um, that it was meaningless, and that I needed to find meaning somewhere else.
Mhm.
And I actually thought that I thought it would be a good idea to go back to Vancouver at that point and start from scratch. I felt like at the time anyway, Vancouver was very connected to nature, close to the ocean. It was a city. I don't know if you've ever been, but it's a town that's very much into fitness and health and well-being, and so I thought, well, maybe that sounds like a good place to start again and to rewrite a different story. So that's where I went. I gave everything away. I drove cars back to the dealership. I gave watches to my people. I gave this sort of mountain of Italian suits to my friends who were going to stay in the industry,
Mhm.
and came back to Vancouver with nothing. It was great. It was such a liberation.
Yeah, so you spoke of like feeding the monster of feeling unworthy.
Yep.
And ugh, that I feel like that's something that so many people can relate to.
Hmm.
So was there a specific point when you felt that you were not feeding that anymore and you started to feel your worth?
Mm. Now that took longer.
Yeah.
That really did to take a long time. So that the intersection of going, this is BS and
Mhm.
it's not serving me, and I don't want to be feeding that. That was really fast. It was like it was almost instantaneous within a day and sort of evolved over a weekend. But the getting to whole,
Mhm.
that was a different story, because I had never explored that. I had never understood it. I had no concept of what it was. I was completely detached from my body, right? And so I just began. I began exploring. I went to the spiritual bookshop and the self-development bookshop, and just kind of I got everything. It's just like, that's when, Eckhart Tolle was first coming out with his Power of Now, and um, they had just published, or Joe Dispenza had done that movie, What the Bleep Do We Know? And he was just kind of emerging onto the scene, and a few others. And I began a re-education. Um, and that was a long process of re-education, and that's why I'm kind of on this mission today to help people rediscover their humanity and live in integrity and become fearless, right? So that they can really discover that wholeness that they already are. And we do that with our whole human coaching as well. um, but again, it was interesting, that chapter of learning took sort of 15 years at least.
Mhm.
I don't think it has to take that long for everybody, but for me, it certainly was, because I got distracted again by shiny things, and um, um, but 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 it's only in this chapter, this last chapter, or this last, maybe there's more, but this third chapter of uh, you know of recognizing my purpose and my mission, and that I am here for a reason, and that's what's really changed for me. That's the driver now of I am actually whole. It took a long time to figure that out, and meditation and mindfulness have helped with that. But yeah, it's a process, because I, I also think, Whitney, that we live in a really complex time
Mhm.
where we are bombarded, especially now in the last sort of 10 or 15 years, 20 years with social media. We're bombarded with images and stories and narratives and messaging and advertising that we aren't enough, right? That we aren't whole, that we need to buy, and then we need to purchase, and we need to do and be, and all this other stuff. So I think it's even harder today to come through that quagmire. Don't even know how to describe it, but you know what I mean, right?
Absolutely, especially like trying to find external things to fill those holes and find that validation rather than like being even aware that you can internally like do that for yourself.
Yeah, and you deserve it, and you're worthy. And I almost think it's like it's your right. It's your you just deserve it, and you don't need to be you we don't need to be coping, with all the mechanisms that we're being offered to cope in today's world. So I have this thing, I call it the personal protection system, right? Where it's like, turn off the news, right? But get informed, right? So stop with the headline news and the tweets, and you can go there if you want, but that's like eating a box of candy, right? Um, but get informed about the things that matter, and how you can make an impact, and how you can serve. And you know, there's a few other things to that, but that's the idea, is that you almost need to, at the same time that you're bringing down the walls of sort of self-protection, from a soul perspective, um, you know, but put up healthy boundaries around the negativity, and that can come our way, because my God, it's a constant daily effort, right? I think.
Yeah, and boundaries are interesting too, especially in a media image driven place
Mm,
where
yeah,
consumption, and you're so afraid to like cut yourself off because you don't want to miss out. So like there's the fear of missing out of
yeah.
happens when you when you place boundaries. Um,
Hmm. Yeah, well, that's a whole other, I mean, we could have a whole conversation about boundaries and and
right.
how they're so healthy to have. And yet I don't know about you, but it was like growing up for me, it was like, no, no boundaries. You just say yes to everything.
Mhm.
Right. It's like, that's not useful or helpful to anybody.
Right,
So
because it allows all of the chaos in as well. Like so
yeah.
you have to sort out what is good and what is bad and what is right for you or resonant, and yeah, it can get really tricky.
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So boundaries, super important. Use them, have them. Be healthily selfish, I think was I did a post recently about, you know, put your oxygen mask on first because you know, if you don't, you can't be of service to yourself or others.
And I think that comes with like feeling worthy and valuing yourself. I think once
Mhm.
you are able to understand that concept, then boundaries kind of are able to more easily be formed.
Yes. Yep. You're absolutely right. You can become stronger.
Yeah. So back to your chapter 2 a little bit, because you said it
Hmm.
like 15 years of re-educating yourself. Like what
Hmm.
was it? Can you describe something that it was within you that like made you want to continue that journey?
Oh, that's a good question too. I think as you start to I think as you start to look at life and look at, you know, meaning and look at maybe spirituality or self-help, even development philosophy. I think once you start realizing that you don't know it all and
Mm.
that you don't know much at all, right? um I was just more and more curious all of the time um about how it all works. You know, we're these little specks of dust at this intersection of space and time. We're on a little rock flying through a galaxy. We're spinning around what at 800 miles an hour on our axis. Like, how does this all make sense? So for me, it was nourishing curiosity,
Mm.
and I really, I don't push that on people, but I really suggest to people that it's, you know, especially in today's world that is so divisive and so sort of solidly entrenched in multiple ecosystems, right? I think it just makes I think it makes life easier. I think it makes you a better human being by being continually being curious and not saying, "Oh, I've arrived." You know, I mean, that was my lesson, right? I thought I had arrived, right? Oh, I got arrived, but I realized that I was nowhere. Right? So it was just feeding that curiosity, and every time you open another book or look at another way of seeing things, or you see the sort of multidimensional kaleidoscope that life is, and it's not black and white, and it's just yeah, for me it was just it's still, and it still is, you know, I pick up books all the time, um and it, it's yeah, it just makes life richer in a holistic way and not a financial way, right? I so yeah, I just haven't been able to stop ever since then.
At what point did you feel like you had learned enough to be able to be in chapter 3 where you're helping people along the way?
You know, I had a really interesting gift given to me a few years ago, and it was a gift of letters, an envelope of letters that were written from my mother to her best friend at the time when I was a child. And I was never supposed to see these, and it was this incredible sort of incredible circumstances that brought them to me or got got them in front of me, and I recognized some small t childhood trauma that had clouded my vision for my whole life.
Mhm.
That I had seen life through what I call these opaque lenses, so you just and that that childhood trauma stuck with me for 40 years. And I and I and I it was like being hit by a train, right? Because you're like, oh wow, I've been doing this whole time because of that. And the minute that I realized that the minute that I got really hit by that train, emotionally, spiritually, mentally, physically, kind of thing, not physically, I guess, but metaphorically, it was just this liberation. I felt like I had become untethered, and I felt finally like my purpose like flew in the side window. It was like there. Um, and So for me, it was a recognition. It was a recognition of something that I had allowed to be, or I had kept muffled my whole life, and or my whole adult life anyway, and just um, blanked it out. I had blanked it out, but by blanking it out, it framed, my whole life. Um, so now, having seen that, and having, I dove in. I did a little bit of trauma and loss therapy. I did a little bit of coaching. I did a little bit more reading, and that sort of liberation from those opaque lenses, those stories I didn't even know I was telling myself, has meant really kind of complete emotional freedom. And now I'm on my mission. I know my purpose. However impactful or not that might be, it doesn't really matter. Impact one person and that's enough. But yeah, chapter 3 has really been about unblocking unrecognized small t trauma, and just exercising it from my body. Bye bye.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a really big thing.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, it is a huge thing, I think. And I think we as humans, in these complex times, right, don't realize how much our old baggage can hold us down and weigh us down, quite literally. That sort of energy stays within you physically, and it bogs you down. And so that's why, part of my mission is deconstruct to reconstruct. When I'm working with anybody or talking with anybody, I'm like, hey, where's that story coming from? What's the origin story? Is it still true? Is it relevant? Most of the time it's not. Is it serving you? No. Okay, let's pack it up and leave it in the past. So yeah, not easy. I didn't even realize it until I got sort of this physical evidence of it, right? It's like, oh, right. Now I know. Now I get it. Now I remember. Huh. So,
Yeah, it's really interesting because I feel like everyone has trauma to a certain extent, and we're all
sure.
walking around with it and so closed off because of it. Like our hearts are just closed down, and like you can't give or receive in that state. Like, so you're
Nope.
just bouncing off of you.
Yes. Yeah. Well, you said it perfectly. Walking around with it, right?
Mhm.
And it's like having a cart with a bunch of bricks in it. It's not serving you. Um, so let's rip the band-aid off and move on, so you can, be open hearted again. Because I think too, like, if you become untethered from those old stories, right, what are the possibilities? And I use this fuel tank analogy with people too, right? It's like, how much fuel is that story taking? Like, how much, oops, sorry, how much, how much does it cost every day to replay that story in your head, right? Um, and and you don't have to stay in therapy for years to get rid of it. It's
Right.
just
Mhm.
let's let's perform an exorcism, right? And get it out so you can be free. Ultimately, that's my thing, you know.
Yeah. So do you have a specific process that you use when you're working with clients as far as coaching them?
Mm, I guess my process would be not having a process. You know, I think there's how do I say this? You know, there's things like the International Coaching Federation and the sort of traditional coaching models that I think are a little bit dated. I think I think life and work and play and society and division is too complex right now to kind of go, oh, we're going to focus on your performance at work, or we're going to focus on your leadership techniques, or we're going to focus on, you know, I'm going to be a transformational coach or whatever, right? To me, it seems like we've thin sliced that industry, right? You know, self-help or therapy or whatever. It's um, so the way I like to work with people is I like to kind of, and our team too, like we like to look at people much more holistically, right? When I'm working with somebody maybe in an organization and we're supposed to focus on, I don't know, their performance or their leadership skills, or I don't know, that we're dealing with something like imposter syndrome, 99% of the time, the conversation has to go into their personal lives and has to go into their family and has to go into lineage and has to go into all of these places that maybe traditional coaching wouldn't go. So that's really kind of my style is who's in there, right? Who's like, where are you? And you know, if I sometimes I see things around nutrition or addiction or, you know, abuse of a substance or whatever. So, you know, I can't ignore that and go, oh, we're going to fix this over here. Meanwhile, you know, the back of the ship is losing water, right? So that's really my approach is taking a lifetime of international experiences and trying to see how those might accelerate your path to freedom from psychological suffering. That's
Yeah,
so I
it
break
sounds
the rules. I break the rules. But I tell people that I break the traditional rules of coaching, but I
yeah.
tell people that um I'm also like about catch and release, right? I don't want you as a client. I don't want to work with you forever. Like
Mhm.
that means I'm not doing my job, right? So let's break it down. Let's reconstruct it. Call me in a year, right? Kind of thing.
Yeah, it's a very humanistic perspective, actually, um,
Hmm.
and looking at someone as a whole person and everything within
Yeah.
them, all of the areas. So,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's why we called it whole human coaching, our coaching coaching thing. Our coaching, it's Monday. I don't know. I haven't had enough coffee yet, apparently. Uh, but it's like, it's, we're our whole mission is to bring a holistic human approach into leaderships and teams and how can we bring humanity into the workplace, because we think it's desperately needed. And I think all you have to do is look at mental health statistics in Canada or the United States or the West in the UK. I think they're all indicators that, you know, maybe we need to rethink things and reimagine a different tomorrow. So um, I don't think it's business as usual, and I don't think it should be. You know.
yeah, I think it's really fascinating how our life experiences might be really intense up to a certain point, because then those experiences are able to help you understand, like, working with clients in a business setting
Hmm.
in a really like
Sure.
intimate, intricate way
Yep.
that you wouldn't be able to help them with if you hadn't gone through those things. So
Oh yes, absolutely. And I have no regrets. You know, I've lived in from Los Angeles to Montenegro to Serbia to London to the Maldives to Bangkok and everywhere in between. And you know, if any of that insanity can help you, I think I'm being of service. And I also, in the last few years, moved to a place of total calm, right? I live in a town of 1,000 people. It's like a, one of those Hallmark rom-com movie sets, picket fences, and I have a barn over here and a stream and so I think I've been through the mashup and the mess, and now I can serve people from this sort of place of calm, cool, collected, you know, country guy in a jeans shirt, perspective, because I've been in the hyper stressed out suit and tie world, and now I'm in the country and connected to nature. So I think hopefully that transpires with people that might be in more stressful situations today. And I don't know, that's my theory anyway. I don't know. I don't know. I hope it's working, Whitney. But
Yeah.
it's working for me.
But you understand environmental spectrums also because you've
Mm,
have experienced so many different ones. So like,
yeah,
a
yeah,
lot of wisdom in that experience.
I think so. Some days.
So
Maybe
if
not today.
people would like to work with you, how can they contact you, or where can we guide
Yeah.
them?
I'm on Instagram, Colin Kingsmill, and or my website, just colinkingsmill.com. And uh, we do team coaching with Whole Human Coaching. But yeah, Colin Kingsmill on Instagram is probably the fastest way to find me, and we can go from there. We can continue the conversation any which way.
Excellent. I will post those in the show notes so people
Okay,
can really easily.
awesome.
Um, yeah, is there anything like at the top of your mind that you feel like we haven't gone over that you would like to share?
No, my gosh, these are such great conversations. We could talk for a long time, but I think, the one message that I like to leave people with is just remember that it doesn't have to be like this. If you are in a place of suffering or a moment of hardship, just just know that it doesn't have to be like this. You can deconstruct what's going on and build something different. Um, so that's my word of hope, I guess, to because
Yeah.
I know when you're in a downward spiral, it can be really hard to see the light, to see any light, to see a glimmer of light, or look up and see possibilities as opposed to looking down on your screen and seeing negativity. So that's really it. Yeah, it doesn't have to be like this. So let's collectively do something about it.
Yeah. Like get out of the pattern of habitual.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
I have one last question that I usually wrap up the conversation with.
Go for it.
That is, if your inner voice had a billboard, what would it say to the world?
I would say, can we please all remember that we are one humanity, one lineage on this little rock? Because I think if we recognize that, I think our food supply would be different. I think the way we treat finances and money and debt and would be different. I think global conflict would be different. We and Yeah, we would stop poisoning ourselves with bad pharmacs. If I think so much of what's wrong in the world today is because we have forgotten who we are and what we are, and that would be my billboard. I like that. Nice one. I think I might. I need
Yeah.
to do a billboard.
Yeah,
So that
excellent.
would be it.
I
Yeah.
like
Thank you for the chat, and thank you for letting me spread my message. I appreciate it.
Lily. Thank you so much for joining me. And
Yeah, you bet.
Thank you
Anytime.
so much for joining me this week. If you're listening and you like what you hear, please consider subscribing and rating this podcast, as it really helps get this podcast out to other people who might be interested in hearing it but don't know about it yet. And also, if you'd like to contact me or reach me, you can reach me at unconditioningpodcast@gmail.com or unconditioningpodcast on Instagram. Thank you so much. And until next time, stay tuned in to you.